Welcome back to the deep dive. I was at this networking event the other day. One of those places where the air conditioning is just way too cold and the coffee's terrible.
Oh yeah, the classic hotel ballroom setup.
Exactly. And I overheard someone near the buffet say, "Look, I only talk to people who can move the needle for me."
Wow.
Right. It really struck me how incredibly transactional so much of our modern life has become. It's always about the ROI, the bottom line, the whole what's in it for me mindset.
Yeah, it's what we call the ledger mindset. We all kind of walk around with these invisible accounting books, constantly tallying up the credits and debits in our relationships.
Mhm.
And if that balance dips into the red, we cut our losses and move on.
We really do. But today, for you listening, we are looking at a personality type that essentially refuses to even open that ledger. Or maybe they just operate on a completely different currency system altogether. We're digging into the Max Energy ME80 personality assessment report today.
Mm.
Specifically, we're focusing on a code known as the SSU.
The SSSU, yeah, the report gives them this very evocative title. They call it the Pure Admirer, or the Deep Affection Guardian.
Deep Affection Guardian.
Right. And to be clear, right up front, in a world that pushes for constant expansion and acquisition and networking, the SSU is honestly a bit of a rebel.
Yeah.
They aren't trying to conquer new territory. They're trying to hold the ground they already have.
Deep Affection Guardian sounds almost, I don't know, almost mythological, like a character class in an RPG or something.
It does.
But the Max Energy system is actually pretty rigorous about the mechanics here. So what's our mission for this deep dive today? We want to understand the actual physics of this unconditional giving. Like, why do they do it? And more importantly,
Where's their breaking point?
exactly. Because even guardians have limits. Where is that breaking point?
And that breaking point is crucial to understand.
Hmm.
Because when an SSU breaks, it is not usually a loud explosion. It's a very quiet inflation.
Okay, before we dissect the SSU specifically, we really need to set the stage. We've touched on the Max Energy ME80 system before on the show, but for the listener who might be totally new to this, give us a quick context, because this isn't just a simple, are you an introvert or an extrovert test?
No, not at all. It's much more about energy flow mechanics. The ME80 system basically views humans as energy processing units.
Okay.
It asks questions like, how does your energy actually move? Does it shoot outward to impact the environment around you? Or does it cycle inward to stabilize yourself? It maps your core values, the stuff that actually drives your engine across four distinct layers of the psyche.
So it's like looking at the wiring diagram of a person rather than just looking at the paint job.
I love that analogy. Exactly. It's the wiring.
So today we are looking at the wiring diagram of the SSU. Let's start with what the report calls the identity section, the core declaration. How does the text actually define the pure admirer?
The core declaration is, quote, loves transparently, placing affection when no conditions are required.
Where no conditions are required. See, that is the part that trips me up a bit. Is that actually possible? It sounds almost a little naive in today's world.
It sounds naive, sure, but it's not naivety. It's actually a structural design.
Mm.
The definition explains that the SSU uses sincere admiration to complete a relationship.
What does that mean, to complete it?
Well, see, most people view a relationship as a vehicle to get something else, right? Status, fun, security, maybe a promotion.
Mm.
But for the SSU, the connection itself is the destination. Once they verify that a person is real or worthy of them, they commit to long-term care and accompaniment.
So if I'm getting this right, they don't need to constantly rebalance the scale because the mere fact that the scale exists is enough for them.
Exactly. They derive their energy from the continuity of the bond. If the wire is connected, they're powered up. They don't necessarily care which way the electricity is flowing at any given second, just as long as the line doesn't get cut.
That is a really powerful distinction, but it also sounds like a recipe for getting taken advantage of, which I definitely want to get to in a bit.
Oh, we will.
First, let's talk about how they navigate the world. The report talks about a control mechanism. Now, usually when we hear control, we think of dominance or aggression. How does the SSU control their environment?
They don't use dominance at all. They use what the report calls centripetal force.
Centripetal force, like gravity.
Think of a massive planet. A planet doesn't run around the galaxy frantically chasing asteroids. It just has a really heavy, stable core that pulls things into its orbit naturally.
Okay, I see.
The SSSU possesses this extremely high centripetal quality. So unlike personalities that expand outward to conquer territory, the SSE's strength actually comes from absolute loyalty and the stable bearing of their inner core value. Their philosophy isn't chasing, it's holding.
So they are the anchor.
Right. Think about a chaotic environment. Let's say a startup going through a massive crisis or a family dealing with a lot of drama. The person who remains absolutely still and stable becomes the most powerful point of reference in that room. That is the SSU. They control the room by grounding it.
Okay, let's get under the hood here. The max energy system uses this energy matrix with 4 layers: IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation. This is the technical code that explains why they act like anchors. I want to walk through these one by one for you listening, because this is where we really see the machinery at work. Let's start at the bottom, the IP layer, or the inner value layer.
This is the foundation. For the SSSU, the IP layer is defined as stable accumulation activation.
Accumulation? That sounds like banking.
In an emotional sense, it really is. Their inner world is built on storing and accumulating value over a long period of time. They aren't volatile people. They don't just wake up one day and decide to change their entire personality because of a bad mood or some new trend they saw online.
Right.
They bank their feelings. And this stable accumulation is what gives them that deep quality we talked about. They are reservoirs, not puddles.
Reservoirs, not puddles. I like that. So they have a very high capacity for storage. What about how they process new information?
Yeah.
That brings us to the IQ layer, the emotional activation layer.
The definition here is experience and verification judgment. And this is incredibly important for people trying to persuade or, say, sell something to an SSU. They do not care about abstract theory or flashy presentations.
So I can't just pitch them on a grand vision.
Not unless they can physically feel it. They verify truth through personal experience. So an SSU might say, I know this person is trustworthy, not because they have a fancy certificate, but because I've actively experienced their consistency over the last 6 months. It's a very empirical, grounded way of processing the world.
So it's entirely show, don't tell.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If you tell an SSU you love them, it honestly means nothing. But if you show up when their car breaks down at 2 in the morning, that is concrete data they can verify.
Okay, moving up the stack to the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer. This is usually where people decide yes or no. How does the SSU make choices?
The report defines this layer as emotional bearing and stability.
Bearing, like a load-bearing wall.
That is the perfect image. When they make a decision, they aren't calculating, hey, what's the most profitable option for me right now? They're calculating, how much weight can I carry to keep this structure stable?
Wow.
Their entire decision-making process is centered on maintaining equilibrium. They are quite literally built to bear heavy emotional loads for other people.
That sounds incredibly heavy, honestly.
It is heavy, but you have to remember they are designed for it. The problem only arises when the load exceeds their structural limit.
Which leads to that breaking point we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. We'll get there.
Let's hit the top layer first, the manifestation layer. This is what we actually see on the outside, right?
Right. The definition here is energy operates inward carrying, absorbing, integrating.
So if I walk into a meeting with an SSU, I'm probably not seeing a loud, charismatic speaker taking over the whiteboard.
Highly unlikely. What you're seeing is someone who is absorbing the room. If there's tension, they absorb it. If there's excitement, they integrate it. They might appear quiet, maybe a bit reserved, but there is massive active processing happening inside. They carry the energy of the room so that the loud types can comfortably do their thing.
So putting those 4 layers together, accumulating, verifying, bearing, absorbing, you really get this clear picture of a deep affection guardian. It feels almost defensive in nature.
Protective is a better word.
Yeah.
And that leads perfectly into their inner traits. The report has this defining mantra for them. Love happens first, counting comes later.
Okay, I have to push back on that a bit. Counting comes later. Does it ever actually come, or do they just ignore the bill forever?
That is the million-dollar question. Ideally, yes, they count later, but often they delay that counting until it is way too late. They naturally choose the long-term investment. They are the ultimate caretakers. And the report highlights that they are extremely sensitive to subtle emotional changes.
So they notice the micro-expression?
They are hyper-tuned to the frequency of connection. If you are slightly off, or if you pull away just a fraction of an inch, the SSU knows instantly. But, and here's the really interesting SSU quirk, they usually don't confront you about it.
Wait, what do they do instead?
They try to fix it through action. The report says they will keep giving even if overlooked or misunderstood. They prioritize the safety of the relationship way above getting an immediate resolution or an apology.
See, that feels noble on the surface, but it also feels super dangerous. It sounds like a massive breeding ground for resentment.
You've hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
And this transitions us perfectly into their shadow blind spot. Every personality type in the ME80 system has a trap. For the SSU, it is called ideal projection.
Ideal projection. Break that down for us.
Well, because they invest so heavily in people, they need that investment to be worth it. So they stop seeing the actual person in front of them and start seeing a projection of who they want that person to be. They project their own incredibly high standards of loyalty onto others.
Like, I would never betray them, so surely they would never betray me.
Exactly. They fill in the blanks favorably. If you're rude to them, they might think, oh, he's just stressed from work. Deep down, he's kind and loyal just like me. They literally edit reality to preserve the connection.
Man. And what happens when the reality becomes undeniable? When the other person is just genuinely not a good person?
The report describes the resulting loss as deep and slow. It is not a sudden, clean break. It's a really slow, agonizing realization that they've been pouring all this energy into a ghost.
And I assume they don't just walk away easily when that happens.
No, withdrawal is incredibly difficult for them. The report notes that their unclear boundaries allow responsibility to just pile up. Instead of saying, hey, stop treating me like this, the SSU tends to yield more to exchange connection.
So they basically pay a higher price to keep a defective product.
They double down. They burn themselves as fuel to keep the relationship warm. And the report uses a very specific term for this: self-consumption.
Self-consumption. That is a brutal term. It creates this very visceral image of them eating themselves alive just to avoid the pain of separation.
It is brutal. And honestly, for any SSU listening right now, this is your red alert. If you find yourself giving more specifically because you are getting less, you're in the trap. You're in self-consumption mode.
So boundaries aren't just a corporate buzzword for them. They're literally a survival mechanism.
Absolutely.
Let's pivot to the lighter side, though. Because when an SSU is healthy and not stuck in that spiral, they are incredible people to have around. What do they look like in a normal social group?
The report calls them the gentle backstop.
A backstop, like in baseball.
Exactly like baseball. The catcher creates safety. If the pitcher throws a wild ball, the backstop is there so it doesn't just fly away into the stands. In a friend group, the SSU is the one interaction style that is all about low-key giving. They remember the tiny details.
Like birthdays and stuff?
Better than that. They remember that you said you liked a specific, obscure brand of sparkling water 3 months ago, and suddenly it's in your fridge. They're the ones helping you clean up the kitchen after the party when everyone else has already gone home.
So they aren't trying to be the star of the show.
No, they don't compete for the focal point at all. They aren't fighting for the microphone at karaoke. But their absence is felt immediately. If the SSU leaves the group, suddenly the whole dynamic feels, I don't know, colder, less safe.
But the risk there, again, is being completely taken for granted.
Huge risk. The report warns about them being seen as a given. Because they make the heavy lifting look so easy, people just assume it is easy. Oh, don't worry, Sarah will handle the logistics. She likes doing it.
And Sarah might not actually like it. She just values the group cohesion more than her own personal comfort.
Correct. And because they absorb energy, rather than projecting it, they won't voice that discomfort until it reaches a critical mass.
Let's switch gears to the professional world, because you might hear deep affection guardian and think, okay, great for a parent or a romantic partner, but does that actually work in a cutthroat business environment? Can this personality type survive the corporate jungle?
The report argues they have massive business value. But it's not in hunting. It's in trust cultivation power.
Trust is really hard to scale, though.
It is, which makes it incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
In an economy where switching costs are so low, where a client can leave you in 5 minutes, the SSU has a superpower for establishing emotion stickiness.
Emotion stickiness. I really like that phrase. It's what keeps a client from jumping ship to a competitor just for a 5% discount.
Exactly. SSUs make clients, and colleagues for that matter, feel genuinely cared for. They're the adhesive of a team. The report points out that they can buffer conflict way before it peaks, because of that extreme sensitivity we talked about.
That IQ layer of verification.
Yes. Because of that, they sense the tension in the Slack channel weeks before HR even knows there's a problem.
They're like an early warning system for team morale.
And they actually do the maintenance work. The follow-ups, the quiet check-ins, the high-energy hunter types, the sales sharks, they often completely ignore that stuff once the contract is signed. The SSU is the one who keeps the bucket from leaking.
So if you're a leader building a team, you need the sharks to go out and get the food. But you absolutely need the SSU to make sure the food doesn't rot in the pantry.
If you only have hunters, you will churn clients constantly. You need the guardian to lock in the long-term value.
based on the report, where should an SSU look for a career? Like, if I'm an SSU listening to this, where do I naturally win?
The report highlights 4 key lanes. First is customer relations, but specifically high-value, long-cycle maintenance.
So definitely not a high-volume call center.
No, absolutely not. Think VIP account management, private banking, managing the top 10 legacy clients who need to feel special and secure for the next 5 to 10 years.
That makes total sense. What else?
Team support, roles like chief of staff, HR, or specialized project management, where the real focus is on the people driving the project, not just the spreadsheet data. They relieve internal team pressure.
Okay.
Third is education and guidance. Because they verify through experience, they are incredibly patient guides. They don't get frustrated when someone struggles to learn because they deeply understand the process of stable accumulation of knowledge. They know that real learning takes time.
And the fourth area?
High trust domains. This is any industry where the trust threshold is massive. Healthcare, law, specialized consulting. Areas where you can't just fake it till you make it. You have to build a fortress of trust, brick by brick. The SSSU is the master builder of those fortresses.
It really all comes down to playing the long game. The SSU seems pretty ill-equipped for the hustle culture quick flip, but they are perfectly designed for sustainable generational growth.
They are long game players in a short game world. That is their core struggle, but it's also their greatest competitive advantage.
So let's bring this all together. We have the SSU, the pure admirer. They possess this centripetal force that anchors everyone around them. They absorb stress, they bank emotional value, and they stick around when things get really tough. But they risk ideal projection and that brutal self-consumption if they aren't careful with their boundaries.
It all brings us back to that core tension, sincerity versus naivety. The SSU is a profound force of stability. We desperately need them. But for the SSU to actually thrive, they cannot just be an unconditionally open door.
The report ends with a really striking thought, a golden sentence, as they call it. I want to read this because I think it captures the shift from being a victim to being a powerhouse for this type. It says, when sincerity is seen and boundaries respected, pure admirer's guardianship no longer becomes consumption, but stable and lasting warm force.
That's the vital shift right there. Stable and lasting warm force.
It completely changes the metaphor from fuel, something that just gets burned up and disappears, to a hearth. A hearth warms the entire house, but it doesn't destroy itself in the process.
That is the ultimate goal. To move from consumption to radiation. To ensure that the backstop isn't just getting endlessly battered by fastballs, but is actually recognized as the foundation of the entire game.
And I think for you listeners, whether you identify as an SSU yourself, or maybe you just work with one, the main takeaway is about recognition. If you are the SSU, you have to recognize your own limits. The ledger might not be your style, but you literally cannot run on a deficit forever.
And if you know an SSU, and you probably do, they're the ones who patiently listened to your rant last week. Please don't take that bearing capacity for granted.
Exactly. Validate the validation they give you.
Because they will not ask for it, but they absolutely need it.
You know, it leaves me with one final thought. If the SSU is pushed completely past their limit and they finally close that ledger for good, what happens then? Is the bridge just burned forever? I think that's something really fascinating to mull over, especially if you've been taking the backstops in your life for granted.
It's a sobering thought. Once they're gone, they're usually gone.
Well, this analysis of the SSSU Pure Admirer comes from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It is pretty dense stuff, but it finally gives a vocabulary to things we usually just vaguely refer to as vibes.
It really does help to see the actual mechanics under the hood.
If you want to dive deeper into your own code or maybe figure out why your boss or your partner acts the way they do, you can check out the official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
You can also find them on social media. Search for Max Energy ACO or Meta Energy on Facebook. They have great breakdowns of all the other personality types there too.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the human psyche. Until then, appreciate the guardians in your life, watch out for those ideal projections, and take care of your own energy. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye, everyone.